Hi, Virginia Tech fans. Will Stewart with Tech Sideline here. Wanted to bring you a quick update on Virginia Tech football assistant coaching staff salaries. We're recording on Friday, January 14th, 2022, and Virginia Tech just today finally released the salaries for the staff that head coach Brent Pry has put together. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, show you a graphic, and kind of put things in context for you. So before we get into the numbers, let me provide you some historical context. Virginia Tech's previous coaching staff, and this is just assistant coaches, not including the head coach. Virginia Tech's previous coaching staff under Justin Fuente was paid a collective, there are 10 assistant coaches, and they were paid a collective $3.5 million a year. Now, if you're not real familiar with college football coaching salaries, that might sound like a lot, but let me put some context for you here. According to the USA Today college football assistant coaches salary database, which I believe this is dated December 2021, so it's fairly fresh information. The Clemson coaching staff was the highest paid assistant coaching staff in the country at $8.5 million a year. So remember, Virginia Tech was at $3.5 million. And then in the ACC behind Clemson, let me find this info, you have Florida State showing up at $5.5 million a year, and North Carolina was at $5.2 million a year. So you can see the Hokies were lagging. You know, we won't get into the national numbers, but you can see they were lagging within their own conference at $3.5 million a year. So when Brent Pry was hired, it was said at his press conference that the salary pool for his assistants was going to be $5.5 million per year, which would make Virginia Tech more competitive in the ACC. And it was also revealed that his support staff salary pool was going to be $2.25 million a year. Now, those numbers aren't etched in stone. It's basically a total salary pool of $7.75 million to portion out as he saw fit between his assistant coaches and his support staff. And we were told at the time that those numbers were released that if needed, there could be more available. You know, donors were willing to kick in more. So that kind of puts things in context for you. So now, all that said, let's go over the information for the Virginia Tech coaching staff that was released today. So the total salary pool did not wind up approaching the $5.5 million that was originally released. It wound up at $5.225 million, which is still a healthy number. And so tops on the staff, you've got Tyler Bowen, who's offense coordinator and tight ends coach, and his compensation is $850,000 a year. And looking at this chart, what I find interesting is that certain assistants, their term is for 3 years and others is for 2 years. Now, back in the day, assistant coaches were hired pretty much on an annual basis. And then they started getting 2-year contracts. So 2-year contracts are fairly common. So there's a level of commitment. If you sign an assistant for 3 years, there's a pretty high level of commitment to that assistant. And you can see on the chart that there are 4 guys who have a 3-year commitment. Tyler Bowen, Joe Rudolph, who we think is the hire of this coaching staff, the offensive line coach and running game coordinator, and also Stu Holders, who was the running backs coach, special teams. And I'm not quite including all the information there. I think Stu is an assistant head coach or something like that I forgot to include on the graphic. And then the 4th assistant with a 3-year commitment is defense coordinator Chris Marr. So let's look at the offensive numbers. They total up to $2.825 million, and the defensive salaries are at $2.4 million. And that makes sense to me because Brent Pry, as a former defense coordinator, has said that he's going to remain heavily involved in the defense at first. I think until he kind of is comfortable letting that part of the operation go. So it makes sense intuitively that he would dedicate more money to an offensive staff, because my guess is he's going to be more hands-off with the offensive staff. So he wanted to hire guys that fit his vision, that he was really comfortable with. And so I think he just tended to allocate more money towards that side of the football. So as far as support staff go, remember there was $2.25 million, loosely allocated for support staff. And the numbers that were released today total up 3 guys that total up to $695,000. And you can see there Dwight Galt IV and Michael Hazel and Michael Villagrana. the salaries were not disclosed for recent hires Brian Christ and Xavier Adibi. We don't know what they are. And you're not going to hear every single salary for every single support staff person. Now that Pry has his 10 assistant coaches put together, he's going to do a lot more work on his support staff, and you're not necessarily going to hear about all of them. So I don't know that we're ever going to get a final reckoning as to how much was spent on the support staff. So looking at the chart, that is the information for the assistant coaches and some of the support staff salaries. We're going to have an article going up on Tech Sideline. I think it's going up even as we record this. And so if you want to grab this graphic from the article, we'll include a link to the article in the video description. So one last thing I wanted to talk about was comparing Pry's staff to Justin Fuente's staff. And so looking at those numbers again, and I've already verbally gone over them, but it's interesting to look at this graphic that David Cunningham put together for us. Again, $3.5 million for Fuente's staff and $5.2 million for Pry's staff. And the highest paid assistant under Fuente's staff was just defense coordinator Justin Hamilton at $600,000, and no one else went over $500,000. If you look at Pry's staff, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys. Half of his staff is over $500,000. So you can see that Virginia Tech has, pardon me, dedicated a lot more money to assistant coaches this time around, and we think and we hope that that'll make them competitive. It's the other thing I find interesting about this graphic is that if you look at the years of D1 experience, there were a lot of guys with D1 experience on Fuente's staff. There was 151 total years in 2021, and going into 2022, Brent Pry has assembled a staff of that has 156 total years of D1 experience. So that's the rundown on the salaries and a comparison to last year. And like I said, we will have the article up on Tech Sideline. We'll link to it in the video description if you want to take a look at it. And thanks for watching, and stop by the website.